80 years ago, on August 28, 1945, the occupation of Japan began, led by the Supreme Commander for the Allied Powers. It was later occupied on September 2, 1945. It would remain so until the Treaty of San Francisco took effect on April 28, 1952. The American military, backed by the British Commonwealth and overseen by the Far Eastern Commission, carried out the occupation with nearly 1 million Allied soldiers. U.S. General Douglas MacArthur, appointed Supreme Commander for the Allied Powers by President Harry S. Truman, directed the occupation until 1952, when General Matthew Ridgway took over. Unlike in Germany and Austria, the Soviet Union played almost no role in Japan's occupation, as it refused to place its troops under MacArthur's authority. This was the only time in Japan's history that the country was occupied by a foreign power. Unlike in Germany, however, the Allies did not take direct control of Japan's civilian administration. After Japan's surrender, the government remained in place and continued to function under the framework of the Meiji Constitution. At General MacArthur's urging, Emperor Hirohito remained on the throne and was granted immunity from war crimes, provided he replaced the wartime cabinet with one acceptable to the Allies and agreed to carry out the Potsdam Declaration, which called for Japan to become a parliamentary democracy. Under MacArthur's direction, Japan adopted major social and economic reforms reminiscent of President Franklin D. Roosevelt's New Deal. In 1947, the Meiji Constitution was replaced by a new American-drafted constitution transforming Japan into a constitutional monarchy and legally restricting the emperor's powers, which had previously been limited only by long-standing custom. While Article 9 of the Constitution explicitly forbade Japan from maintaining a military or pursuing war as a means to settle international disputes, this policy soon became problematic, especially as neighboring China fell under the control of the Chinese Communist Party, and the Korean War broke out. As a result, the National Police Reserve was founded in 1950. The NPR was reorganized into the Japan Self-Defense Forces in 1954, effectively completing the de facto remilitarization of Japan. The occupation formally ended with the Treaty of San Francisco, signed on September 8, 1951, and took effect on April 28, 1952. This restored Japan's full sovereignty except for the Ryukyu Islands, the Okinawa Prefecture, and ended direct U.S. control over its civil administration. At the time, the U.S.-Japan Security Treaty, later revised in 1960, permitted tens of thousands of American troops to remain stationed in Japan, not as occupiers, but by agreement with the Japanese government. The occupation of Japan is often described in three phrases. First, the effort to punish and reform the country. Second, the reverse course, when priorities shifted to curbing dissent and rebuilding Japan's economy to align with the Western Bloc during the Cold War. And third, the conclusion with a formal peace treaty signed with 48 allied nations and the creation of a lasting military alliance with the United States. 70 years ago, on August 28, 1955, while visiting family in Money, Mississippi, 14-year-old Emmett Till, an African-American from Chicago, was brutally murdered for allegedly flirting with a white woman, Carolyn Bryant, 4 days earlier. His assailants, Roy Bryant, Carolyn's husband, and J.W. Milam, one of Roy's half-siblings, made Emmett carry a 75-pound cotton gin fan to the bank of the Tallahatchie River and ordered him to take off his clothes. The two men then beat him nearly to death, gouged his eye, shot him in the head, and then threw his body, tied to the cotton gin fan with barbed wire, into the river. 3 days later, Till's mutilated and bloated body was discovered and retrieved from the river. Till's body was returned to Chicago, where his mother insisted on an open casket funeral at Robert's Temple Church of God in Christ. She wanted the world to see what had been done to her son, exposing not only his brutalized body, but also the realities of American racism, the savagery of lynching, and the fragility of American democracy. Tens of thousands came to view his body, and photographs published in black newspapers and magazines stirred both outrage and sympathy across the country. The murder drew national attention to the lack of civil rights in Mississippi, as northern papers condemned the state, while local officials, after briefly calling for justice, shifted to defending the killers in the face of outside criticism. In September 1955, an all-white jury acquitted Bryant and Milam, shielded by double jeopardy. The men later admitted in a 1956 Look magazine interview that they had tortured and murdered Till, selling their story for $4,000. His killing became a spark for the civil rights movement, with the Montgomery bus boycott beginning just months later in December 1955, eventually leading to a Supreme Court ruling that segregation on buses are unconstitutional. Historians emphasize that Till's life was tragic. It still echoes through history. In the 21st century, the Emmett Till Memorial Commission was founded. The Sumner Courthouse was restored with an interpretive center, and 51 Delta sites tied to Till were memorialized. On March 29, 2022, President Joe Biden signed the Emmett Till Anti-Lynching Act, officially making lynching a federal hate crime. And on August 28, 1963, the March on Washington for Jobs and Freedom was held in Washington, D.C. The march aimed to promote civil and economic rights for African Americans. It featured performances by well-known singers such as Mahalia Jackson and Marian Anderson, along with speeches from several civil rights leaders. The most famous address came from the closing speaker, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., who stood before the Lincoln Memorial to deliver his iconic "I Have a Dream" speech, calling for an end to racial segregation and legalized discrimination. The event was organized by Bayard Rustin and A. Philip Randolph, who united civil rights, labor, and religious groups under the theme of jobs and freedom. Attendees was estimated between 200,000 and 300,000 people, with the commonly accepted figure being 250,000. Observers noted that about 75 to 80% of those present were black. As one of the largest human rights demonstrations in United States history, the march drew diverse support, including Walter Reuther, president of the United Auto Workers, who played a key role as the highest-ranking white organizer. The march is widely seen as paving the way for the Civil Rights Act of 1964. It also set the stage for the Selma voting rights movement, which, through extensive media attention, contributed to the passage of the Voting Rights Act of 1965. And that's all I have for today. If you like what you hear, leave a comment down below and subscribe. This is Stephen Luke, and I'll see you next time for another history update. And finally, 60 years ago, on August 28, 1965, Subway, the multinational fast food restaurant franchise that specializes in submarine sandwiches and wraps, was founded by Fred DeLuca and financed by Peter Buck in 1965 as Pete's Super Submarine Sandwiches in Bridgeport, Connecticut. After undergoing several name changes, the chain adopted the name Subway in 1972. 2 years later, in 1974, it launched its franchise business by opening a second location in Wallingford, Connecticut. It was the fastest growing franchise in the world in 2015, and as of September 2023, has over 37,000 locations in more than 102 countries and territories. More than half its locations are in the United States. It is the largest single brand restaurant chain and the largest restaurant operator in the world. Its international headquarters are in Shelton, Connecticut. Okay, alright. Also, let me explain to all of you. When you were kids, you asked for bigger allowances, wanted to go bungee jumping, tarantula, an old plastic TV, an agent, a jetpack, wanting to drive, borrowing a drill from your father, or even bathe the cat? And the simple answer for all those questions is no. But when you ask for a Subway sandwich with plenty of mustard and pickles, you get yes. At Subway, there's no such thing as no. You get exactly what you want. And an awesome sub with everything you like and nothing you don't. Subway, eat fresh.